The bell rang for recess, and the boy hurried down the hallway, clutching his lunchbox. That's when he saw him, leaning against a locker, laughing with a group of kids. The boy froze. It was like staring into a mirror. Same tousled brown hair. Same crooked smile. Same faint scar above the left eyebrow. His heart hammered as he stumbled forward, lunchbox slipping from his grip. The stranger turned, and their eyes locked. The chatter around them faded. "Who are you?" the boy whispered. The other boy's grin vanished. "I just moved here," he said, voice trembling. "Why do you look like me?" They stood inches apart, strangers sharing a face. The boy's throat tightened. "When's your birthday?" he blurted. The answer made his stomach drop. The same day, same year. Without another word, he sprinted home, legs burning, dread clawing at his chest. His mother was in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables. "Mom," he gasped, slamming the door behind him. "There's a kid at school, he looks exactly like me." Her knife clattered to the counter. She turned slowly, her face pale as milk. "What did you say?" He described the boy, the scar, the birthday, the eerie familiarity. Her hands shook. She stumbled backward, knocking a glass to the floor. It shattered, sharp shards scattering like secrets. "Mom," the boy pleaded, reaching for her. She crumpled to the floor, clutching her chest, her breath ragged. "It's impossible," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Outside, a storm began to rage. The days that followed were a blur of silence. The boy's mother moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. She avoided his questions, brushing them off with shaky excuses. "It's just a coincidence," she'd say, turning away to wipe non-existent spills from the counter. But her hands never stopped trembling. At school, the twin, the other boy, kept his distance. They exchanged nervous glances in the hallway, but neither dared to speak. The boy's classmates whispered, pointing at them like exhibits in a museum. "Freaky Friday twins," someone jeered. He ignored them, his mind racing. One afternoon, while his mother napped fitfully on the couch, he crept into her bedroom. Dust motes floated in the sunlight filtering through the curtains. He knelt beside her dresser, pulling open the bottom drawer where she kept old photo albums. Beneath a stack of faded birthday cards, he found a small wooden box. Inside lay a hospital bracelet, its plastic yellowed with age. The name was hers, but the date, the year was smudged, as if someone had rubbed it raw. A floorboard creaked. He froze, clutching the bracelet. His mother stood in the doorway, her face a mask of horror. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp as broken glass. He stammered, holding up the bracelet. Her breath hitched. "Put that back," she hissed, snatching it from his hand. "And never go through my things again." That night, he lay awake, the house heavy with secrets. Rain tapped against his window. He replayed her reaction, the panic in her eyes, the way she'd cradled the bracelet like a wounded bird. Why would a hospital bracelet scare her so much? A memory surfaced, a story she'd told him years ago, when he'd asked about his father. "He's gone," she'd said, her voice flat. "We lost him before you were born." But now, he wondered. Lost how? The next morning, he skipped school, waiting until his mother left for her shift at the diner. He returned to the wooden box. This time, he found a folded letter tucked beneath the bracelet, a faded note addressed to her, the ink bleeding at the edges. "You need to leave now," it read. "He knows." No signature. As he stared at the words, a fragment of another memory struck him, a dream, or something deeper. A sterile room. Beeping machines. A nurse's voice, tight with urgency, there were 2 heartbeats. His mother's scream. Downstairs, the front door slammed. He shoved the box back, his pulse roaring. That evening, he confronted her. "Who wrote the letter?" he asked, standing firm as she washed dishes. Her shoulders stiffened. "What letter?" she said, too quickly. "The one in the box." The one that says, he knows. The plate she was holding slipped into the soapy water. She didn't turn around. You're imagining things, she whispered. But her reflection in the window betrayed her, tears streaking her cheeks, her lips pressed into a thin, desperate line. He stormed out, the screen door banging behind him. Dusk painted the sky in bruised purples. He didn't know where he was going until he found himself outside the school playground. And there, sitting alone on a swing, was the other boy. Their eyes met. The twin stood, hesitating. "I've been waiting for you," he said quietly. "I think we need to talk." The playground was empty, the swings creaking faintly in the wind. The boy hesitated, then walked toward his twin, his shoes crunching over gravel. Up close, the resemblance was even more unsettling, the same faint freckles scattered like constellations across their noses, the same way they both tilted their heads when nervous. "I'm adopted," the twin said abruptly, kicking at the dirt. "My parents told me when I turned 10. They said my birth mom was young, couldn't take care of me." He paused, glancing sideways. "But they never said anything about you." The boy swallowed hard. "My mom won't talk about it. She's hiding something." He rolled up his jeans, revealing a thin, pale scar above his knee. "I got this falling off my bike when I was 7. The twin's eyes widened. Slowly, he pulled up his own pant leg. There, in the exact same spot, was an identical scar. "I've had this since I can remember," he whispered. "My parents said it was from a surgery when I was a baby." A cold breeze swept through the playground. The boy shivered. "We need to find out the truth," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his ribs. "Will you help me?" The twin nodded, jaw set. They agreed to meet the next day after school, swapping phone numbers scribbled on crumpled candy wrappers. That night, the boy lay awake, his mind racing. He replayed the twins' words: adopted, birth mom, surgery. None of it fit with his mother's vague stories about his past. The next morning, he found her at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her coffee. Her hands still shook. "Mom," he said gently, "tell me about when I was born." She flinched, her spoon clinking against the mug. "It was a difficult birth," she said, her voice hollow. "You were early. We almost lost you." "Was anyone else there? Nurses? Doctors?" Her knuckles whitened around the mug. "Why are you asking this?" "Because I'm not the only one," he snapped, frustration boiling over. "There's another me out there, and you're acting like it's normal." She stood abruptly, coffee sloshing onto the table. "Enough," she shouted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't understand what you're digging up." Before he could respond, she fled to her room, the door slamming shut. After school, the twins met at the bus stop, their backpacks heavy with unease. The adopted boy had brought a folder, his adoption papers, handed to him by his parents years ago. Inside was a faded photo of a woman holding a newborn, her face blurred by time. On the back, a handwritten note: St. Mary's Hospital. "Forever grateful." "That's the hospital where I was born," the boy said, pointing to the name. "My mom's bracelet had the same place." They took the bus across town, their knees bouncing with nerves. St. Mary's loomed ahead, a brick building with ivy crawling up its walls. Inside, the receptionist eyed them suspiciously. "We're researching a school project," the twin lied, forcing a smile. "About birth records from 20 years ago?" The woman snorted. "Those records are sealed. Unless you have a court order, I can't help you." Defeated, they slunk outside. As they rounded the corner of the building, the boy spotted an old maintenance worker smoking by a dumpster. On a whim, he approached. "Excuse me," he said, "do you know if St. Mary's ever had a fire? Or something that might have destroyed records?" The man squinted, blowing out a cloud of smoke. "Nah. But back in the day, there was a scandal. Some nurse got caught selling babies to rich families." He chuckled darkly. "Wild times." The twins stared at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. As they walked back to the bus stop, the adopted boy suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said, digging through his folder. He pulled out a crumpled letter, a form from the adoption agency. At the bottom, a name was stamped in smudged ink, Dr. Eleanor Gray. "Who's that?" the boy asked. "The doctor who signed my papers," his twin replied. "Maybe she's still alive." That night, the boy Googled the name. His breath caught. Dr. Eleanor Gray had died 5 years earlier, in a car accident. The obituary mentioned she'd worked at St. Mary's for over 3 decades. Buried at the bottom was a single, chilling line, survived by her brother, Harold Gray. He scribbled down the brother's address, hands trembling. It was only 3 towns over. The next day, he skipped school again, telling his twin to meet him at the bus station. As they boarded, the adopted boy frowned. "What if this is a mistake?" The boy stared out the window. "What if it's not?" The bus ride felt endless. The twins sat shoulder to shoulder, the address crumpled in the boy's damp palm. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of grays and greens. When they finally reached the stop, they stepped onto an empty street lined with sagging rowhouses. Harold Gray's home was the last one, its porch light flickering like a dying heartbeat. The boy knocked, his throat dry. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Footsteps shuffled inside, and the door creaked open a crack. A grizzled face peered out, a man in his 70s, with a patchy beard and eyes sharp as flint. "What?" he barked. The twins exchanged a glance. "Are you Harold Gray?" the boy asked. The man's gaze darted between their identical faces. His expression shifted, surprise, then fear. He tried to slam the door, but the boy wedged his foot in the gap. "Please," he begged. "We think your sister knew our mother." Harold froze. For a long moment, he stared at them, his breath ragged. Then, with a grunt, he opened the door wider. Inside. Quickly. The house smelled of mothballs and stale coffee. Newspapers cluttered every surface. Harold didn't offer them a seat. "Eleanor's dead," he said flatly, lighting a cigarette. "Whatever you're digging for, it's buried." The boy stepped forward. "We think she helped our mother. Or maybe hurt her." Harold laughed, a bitter sound. "My sister helped a lot of people. Got paid well for it too." He blew smoke toward the ceiling. "You two look like her." "Who?" the twin asked. "The girl who showed up at the hospital that night, scared, pregnant, running from some brute. Eleanor called me after, said it was a mess. Twins, but one didn't make it. Or so they told her." His eyes narrowed. "But here you are." The boy's pulse raced. "Our mother said my brother died." Harold snorted. "Your mother was lied to. Or she's lying." He stubbed out his cigarette. "Eleanor kept records. Hidden ones. Cops never found M." He rummaged in a drawer, tossing a key onto the table. "Storage unit, downtown. Box 114. Don't come back here." They left in a daze, the key burning a hole in the boy's pocket. When he returned home, his mother was pacing the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. "Where were you?" she cried. He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to the letter on the table, the one she'd accidentally left out. It was addressed to her, the sender's name clear now, Richard Carter. "Who's that?" he demanded. She crumpled into a chair. "Someone from a long time ago," she whispered. "He's our grandfather, isn't he?" Her head snapped up. "How do you?" "Because Harold Gray just told us everything." She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. "You don't understand. He's dangerous." "So were you," he shot back, his voice cracking. "You lied to me." That night, he waited until her sobs quieted. Then he crept to her desk, finding the letter. Richard Carter's address was scribbled at the top, a rural route 2 hours away. He texted his twin, "Meet me at the bus stop at 6 a.m. We're ending this." Sleep never came. At dawn, he slipped out, his backpack heavy with the storage unit key and a flashlight. His twin was already waiting, eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. "You sure about this?" he asked. The boy nodded. Somewhere in that storage unit was the truth. And if his mother wouldn't face it, he would. The storage unit was a concrete bunker at the edge of town, rows of metal doors glaring under flickering fluorescent lights. The twin stood in front of Unit 114, the key cold in the boy's hand. He hesitated, glancing at his brother, whose face mirrored his own unease. "What if it's nothing?" the twin whispered. "Then we'll have wasted a bus ride," the boy said, forcing a grin. But his stomach churned as the lock clicked open. The door groaned upward, dust swirling in the stale air. Inside were stacks of cardboard boxes, labeled in messy cursive. 1998 to 2002, patient files. Confidential. The twins exchanged a look. They dragged a box into the dim light, coughing as they lifted the lid. Folders spilled out, crammed with paperwork and grainy photos. The boy's breath caught. There, paper-clipped to a birth certificate, was a photo of their mother, younger, her face swollen from crying, cradling a newborn. The date matched his birthday. But the document listed 2 live births, male twin A, male twin B. At the bottom, a note scrawled in red ink, one discharged with mother. One transferred to adoption agency per arrangement. "Arrangement?" the twin said, voice shaking. "She sold me?" "No," the boy said quickly, though doubt clawed at him. He dug deeper, finding receipts, large sums paid to E. Gray from an anonymous numbered account. Another folder held a list of names, dates, and hospitals. At the top, a heading, Placements. The twin sank to the floor, clutching a photo of himself as a baby, wrapped in a blue blanket. "They stole me," he said hollowly. Before the boy could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother, "Where are you? Please come home." He ignored it, shoving the folder into his backpack. "We need to find Richard Carter." The address led them to a weathered farmhouse, its porch sagging under overgrown vines. A pickup truck rusted in the tall grass. As they approached, a dog barked furiously, chained to a post. The front door swung open before they could knock. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard streaked white. His eyes, their eyes, narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" The boy lifted his chin. "Are you Richard Carter?" The man froze, staring at their faces. His gruffness melted into something like grief. "Oh my God," he rasped. "You're her boys." Inside, the house felt frozen in time. A threadbare sofa, a wood stove, and walls cluttered with family photos, none of their mother. Richard limped to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of whiskey. "Sit," he said, pouring 3 glasses with unsteady hands. The twins stayed standing. "Tell us about our mother," the boy demanded. Richard downed his drink. "She was my daughter," he said quietly. "Ran off when she got pregnant. Too scared of that bastard she was dating, a real piece of work. Found her months later, hiding at a shelter. Brought her home. Then she went into labor early," he trailed off, staring into his glass. "And," the twin pressed. "Hospital called me when it was over. Said there'd been complications. 1 baby died. Your mama was hysterical, screaming they'd taken him. I thought she'd lost her mind." His voice broke. "Next morning, she was gone. Just vanished. Left a note saying she couldn't stay." The boy's fists clenched. "But we didn't die. Both of us are here." Richard looked up, tears in his eyes. "I know that now. I spent years looking for her. Hired detectives, everything. Then last year, Eleanor Gray's brother tracked me down. Told me about the babies she'd sold. Said there might have been 3. The room spun. 3. The twin staggered back. You're lying. Richard stood, opening a drawer. He tossed a photo on the table, their mother, younger, holding 2 newborns. Behind her, a nurse, Eleanor Gray, smiled coldly. Third one went overseas, he said. Rich family in Australia. I tried finding him, but the trail went cold. The boy's phone buzzed again. His mother's name flashed. This time, he answered. Come home, she sobbed. I'll tell you everything. Outside, storm clouds swallowed the sun. The twins didn't speak on the bus ride back. There were no words for what they'd learned, that their lives were built on lies, that love could be a wound, that somewhere across the world, another boy shared their face. When the boy walked into his house, his mother sat at the kitchen table, a battered journal open in front of her. She looked up, her eyes raw. I wanted to protect you, she said. He sat across from her, his brother lingering in the doorway. From what? She touched the journal's pages, filled with frantic writing. From him. Your father. He would have killed you if he'd known there were 2. So when they told me one had died, I thought it was a sign. To run. To save at least one of you. Her voice shattered. But I was wrong. I should have fought harder. The boy reached across the table, taking her trembling hand. Fight now, he said. She nodded, tears dripping onto the paper. There's more. The nurse, Eleanor, she kept calling me. Asking for money. Threatening to tell your father where I was. I sent her every penny I had. Then one day, she stopped. I thought it was over. But it wasn't, the twin said from the doorway. She turned, seeing him fully for the first time. A choked sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh. You have his smile, she whispered. Both of you. The boy pushed the storage unit folder toward her. And there's another. Her face paled as she read. Oh God. 3. Outside, thunder cracked, the first raindrops hitting the roof. Somewhere, a third heartbeat thrummed in the dark. The mother's hands trembled as she flipped through the storage unit documents, each page a fresh blow. The boys sat across from her, their faces pale, their silence heavy. Rain lashed the windows, the storm mirroring the chaos inside the room. I thought it was just one lie, she whispered. I didn't know. 3. Her voice broke as she recounted the night they were born, the panic, the screams, the nurse's cold efficiency. Eleanor told me one of you didn't survive. She handed me a blanket, said to hold you close and say goodbye. I was so young, so scared. I believed her. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. But when I begged to see the body, she refused. That's when I knew something was wrong. But your father, he was outside the hospital, shouting, threatening to take you. I had to run. The twin stood abruptly, pacing the room. So you just left me? I thought you were gone, she cried. I swear, I would have torn that place apart if I'd known. But Eleanor kept calling, demanding money to keep quiet. I sent her everything I had, working double shifts, skipping meals, anything to protect the son I still had. She turned to the boy, her eyes pleading. You have to believe me. He wanted to. But the anger simmering in his chest wouldn't relent. Why didn't you tell me the truth? All these years. Because I was ashamed, she shouted, the words raw. Ashamed I couldn't protect you both. Ashamed I let them manipulate me. Every time I looked at you, I saw him, your father. And I hated myself for it. The admission hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. The twin stopped pacing, his voice quiet. What about the third? The mother wiped her face, steeling herself. She pulled a faded Polaroid from the journal, a snapshot of Eleanor Gray holding 3 newborns swaddled in identical blankets. The boys leaned in, their breaths catching. 3 tiny faces, 3 sets of eyes closed in sleep. The nurse kept this, she said. I found it in her office the night I fled. I didn't understand then. I just grabbed it. Her finger traced the edge of the photo. Eleanor must have sold him quickly. No paperwork, no trail. But your grandfather mentioned Australia. If we can find the family. We need proof first, the boy interrupted. DNA proof. For all of us. The twin nodded. I'll ask my parents. They'll help. The DNA kits arrived 3 days later. The boys swabbed their cheeks in silence, the mother hovering nearby, her guilt a shadow. When the twins' adoptive parents dropped him off, they lingered in the driveway, their faces drawn with worry. We had no idea, his mother said, clutching her husband's arm. The agency told us his birth mother was a teenager who couldn't cope. We would have never. The boy believed her. The real monsters wore scrubs and smiles. A week later, the results came. The boys huddled around the laptop, the mother peering over their shoulders. The screen loaded slowly. Genetic match, 99.9% likelihood of full siblings. The twin let out a shaky laugh. Guess we're stuck with each other. The boy didn't smile. His eyes dropped to the third line, additional match detected. A name, redacted, with a location, Melbourne, Australia. He exists, the mother breathed, collapsing into a chair. Oh God, he's real. The twin pulled up a map, typing furiously. There's a charity here that helps trafficking victims. They could have records. Maybe even contact him. The boy turned to his mother. Will you help us? Or are you still scared? She met his gaze, her jaw set. I'm done running. The next morning, they stormed the local police station, the storage unit documents spilling from their arms. The officers listened skeptically at first, until the mother slapped Eleanor's ledger on the desk, names, dates, payments. This woman sold my children, she said, her voice trembling with rage. And I want her partners in hell. By afternoon, detectives were involved. News vans clustered outside the house, reporters shouting questions. The boys stayed upstairs, watching the chaos unfold. What if they can't find him? The twin murmured. The boy didn't answer. On the laptop, an email draft glowed, a message to the Australian charity, pleading for help. He hovered over the send button. Do it, the twin said. He clicked. That night, the mother tiptoed into the boy's room, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. I'm sorry, she said again, the words worn thin. He stared at the ceiling. Why didn't you fight harder? She sat on the edge of his bed, her weight familiar. Because I thought love meant letting go. Her hand brushed his hair, tentative. I was wrong. Love means fighting, even when you're terrified. Downstairs, the phone rang. The boy bolted upright, his heart in his throat. They stumbled down together, the twin joining them, all three crowding around the speaker. A voice, crisp and accented, echoed through the line. We've found him. The video call was scheduled for noon. By 11 a.m., the boys and their mother had rearranged the living room 3 times, shifting lamps, angling chairs, as if perfecting the backdrop might soften the earthquake ahead. The twin paced near the window, his adoptive parents sitting stiffly on the couch. The boy's mother hovered by the laptop, adjusting her scarf. What if he hates me, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. At 12:07 p.m., the screen blinked. A face appeared, older, early 20s, with their sharp jawline and the same unruly hair, but shorter, styled carefully. He wore a navy sweater, his posture guarded. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Day, he said, his Australian accent warm yet wary. The mother choked back a sob. The boy leaned forward. Hi. The man on the screen hesitated, glancing off camera, where muffled voices spoke. An older couple hovered behind him, his adoptive parents, their faces kind but tense. Mum, Dad, it's all right, he said softly. I've got this. The boy's mother found her voice first. What's your name? Liam, he replied. Or it was, until last week. His laugh was brittle. Turns out my birth certificate's a forgery. Surprise. The twin winced. They didn't tell you? Liam's gaze hardened. Oh, they told me I was adopted. Just not that I was stolen. He leaned closer, the screen pixelating. Your charity people sent me the DNA results. And this? He held up the Polaroid of the 3 newborns. Wild, eh? I've got baby pics with 2 toddlers I've never met. The mother reached out, fingertips grazing the screen. I'm so sorry. Liam's composure cracked. Sorry doesn't fix it, does it? I spent my whole life thinking someone didn't want me. Now I find out I was sold? His adoptive mother placed a hand on his shoulder, but he shrugged it off. Why'd you even look for me? To clear your conscience? The boy flinched. We didn't know you existed until a week ago. Silence stretched, thick and sour. Then Liam sighed, rubbing his eyes. Look, I'm not the villain here. Neither are you. But this, he gestured at them all. It's a lot. The twin spoke up. What do you want to do? Liam stared at them, his expression softening. Dunno. Maybe, see if we've got anything in common besides this mess. A faint smirk tugged his lips. You guys like footy? The boy blinked. Football? Australian football. It's brutal. You'd hate it. The twin laughed, sudden and bright. We'll stick to basketball. The mother watched, tears streaming, as her sons traded jokes, awkward, fragile, but alive. Later, Liam's adoptive father leaned into the frame. We'd like to meet, he said firmly. Properly. We've booked flights. The room froze. When? The boy asked. Next Thursday, Liam said. If you're ready. After the call, the mother collapsed into her chair, trembling. The boy knelt beside her. You okay? She cupped his face. You have his laugh, she whispered. That night, the local news ran a segment on the trafficking ring. The mother's face flashed on screen, a photo from her waitress badge, her voice shaky but resolute in a taped interview. These children weren't lost, she said. They were taken. And we won't stop until every family gets answers. The boy watched, pride swelling in his chest. Upstairs, his phone buzzed. A text from Liam, you guys game online? I've got a console here that needs a thrashing. They played until dawn, 3 brothers chasing pixels across a screen, their voices tangled in laughter and static. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a fix. But it was a start. The airport buzzed with strangers hugging, crying, laughing, stories colliding under flickering departure boards. The boy stood with his mother and twin, their eyes glued to the arrival's gate. His stomach churned. What if Liam changed his mind? What if seeing them in person was too much? Then, there he was. Liam walked out alone, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked older up close, his stubble thicker, his posture tense. But his eyes, their eyes, darted across the crowd, searching. The twin waved awkwardly. Liam froze. For a breath, no one moved. Then he strode forward, dropping his bag. The boys closed the gap, 3 magnets snapping together. They didn't hug. They stood inches apart, staring, as if memorizing every detail. You're taller, Liam said to the twin, voice cracking. You're uglier, the twin shot back, grinning. Liam snorted. Yeah, well, you both look like soggy biscuits. The mother hung back, clutching her coat sleeves. Liam noticed her, his smile fading. She stepped forward, tears spilling silently. She faltered. I don't expect you to forgive me. Liam's jaw tightened. I don't, he said bluntly. Her face crumpled. But, he added softly, I didn't come here to hate you. His adoptive parents emerged then, trailing luggage. His mother, a petite woman with silver hair, approached, her hand outstretched. "We've heard so much about you," she said to the boy's mother. "Thank you for bringing our son home." The word home hung in the air, fragile and contested. Richard's farmhouse felt different with all of them there, less a relic of pain, more a shelter. The old man hovered in the kitchen, brewing endless cups of tea, his gruffness softened by guilt. "Should have looked harder," he muttered, setting a plate of cookies on the table. The boys escaped to the backyard, a sprawling field edged by woods. Liam kicked a soccer ball he'd brought, testing the twins' skills. "You call that a pass?" he taunted, dribbling past them effortlessly. "You call that a haircut?" the twin retorted, tugging at Liam's cropped sleeves. They played until the sky turned amber, their laughter carrying over the grass. Inside, the mothers talked, awkwardly at first, then in rushed, tearful bursts. Liam's adoptive mother confessed her fears. "We never told him the adoption felt rushed. The agency pressured us to sign fast." The boy's mother clasped her hand. "You gave him a good life. That's all I wanted." At dusk, Richard lit a bonfire. They gathered around it, the flames painting their faces in gold. Liam pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo of his girlfriend back in Melbourne. "She's a nurse," he said. "Irony's brutal, eh?" The twin tossed a stick into the fire. "You tell her about us?" "Yeah. She reckons we should sell the story to telly. Make bank." The boy laughed, but his mother stiffened. "This isn't a joke," she said quietly. Liam met her gaze. "Nah. But laughing beats crying, right?" Richard cleared his throat, nodding to the farmhouse. "Got something for you." Inside, he handed the boys 3 matching pocket knives, initials engraved. "Belong to my dad. Figured you should have 'em." The twins exchanged glances. "What about Liam?" the boy asked. Richard grinned. "Check the box." Under crumpled paper lay a 4th knife, LC, for Liam Carter. "Grandpa's getting ahead of himself," Liam mumbled, but he pocketed it with a small smile. Later, as the fire died, the boy's phone buzzed. A detective's name flashed. He stepped away, answering. "We've identified 6 more victims," the detective said. "Your mother's testimony, it's cracking the case wide open." He watched his family, his real family, through the window. His mother smiled at something Liam said, her face lighter than he'd ever seen it. The twin juggled cookies, trying to impress Liam's adoptive dad. "What happens now?" he asked the detective. "We build a case. Put the traffickers away for good." He hung up, tucking the phone into his pocket. Liam wandered outside, lighting a cigarette. "Trouble?" "The opposite." Liam blew smoke skyward. "Mum, my adoptive mum, wants us all to visit Melbourne. Says you'll love the beaches." The boy raised an eyebrow. "You asking or telling?" "Asking," Liam said, flicking the cigarette into the dirt. "Mostly." Inside, the twin waved frantically. "Oi. They're making s'mores." The boy turned to Liam. "Coming?" Liam hesitated, then grinned. "Why not? Reckon I can burn a marshmallow better than you." They walked back to the fire, shoulders brushing. The road ahead was jagged, the wound still raw. But for the first time, the boy didn't feel alone in the fight. The morning of the reunion dawned crisp and bright, sunlight spilling over Richard's fields like melted butter. The boy's mother stood on the porch, watching as her sons, all 3 of them, hauled picnic tables into the yard. Liam barked orders like a drill sergeant, the twin heckled him relentlessly, and the boy balanced paper plates with the focus of a tightrope walker. Her heart swelled. They were a mess. They were perfect. Guests arrived in waves, neighbors, detectives, even a reporter who'd covered their story. The adoptive parents mingled, swapping awkward yet heartfelt stories. Richard manned the grill, his gruffness thawed by the sight of his grandsons arguing over ketchup brands. Midway through the afternoon, the mother climbed onto a hay bale, tapping a spoon against her lemonade glass. The crowd quieted. I'm not good at speeches, she began, her voice wavering. But I owe you all the truth. Especially my sons. She spoke of shame, of fear, of the lies that had festered like wounds. I let my past steal your future, she said, looking at Liam. But today, we take it back. She nodded to the boy, who dragged a sapling from the truck, a young oak, its roots bundled in burlap. We're planting this, he announced. For every family still searching. The boys dug the hole together, their grandfather's knives gleaming on a nearby bench. Liam tossed in a handful of Australian soil he'd brought. The twin added a photo of the 3 newborns. The boy hesitated, then dropped in his mother's hospital bracelet. For the ones we lost, he said. As they packed the dirt, a news van pulled up. The reporter approached, microphone in hand. Any message for the victims still out there? The mother straightened. Don't stop fighting. And if you're hiding from the truth, she glanced at her sons. Let it hurt. Then let it heal. That night, they gathered around the bonfire one last time. Liam strummed a guitar, butchering an AC/DC song. The twin roasted marshmallows into charcoal briquettes. The boy leaned against his mother, her arm around his shoulders. What's next? She asked quietly. He pulled a flyer from his pocket, a charity event for trafficking survivors. We start here. She smiled. We? All of us. Liam flopped down beside them, guitar abandoned. So, when do we blow up social media with our reunited triplet thing? Gotta make it viral before I'm old and bald. The twin threw a marshmallow at him. You're already halfway there. They laughed, the sound blending with the crackle of the fire. Above them, stars pulsed in the vast, forgiving sky. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth, there'd be court dates, tough conversations, days when the anger flared anew. But tonight, they were just a family. Flawed, stitched together, but whole. Epilogue. The oak tree grew faster than anyone expected. By the following summer, its branches shaded the spot where the boys had buried their past. The mother volunteered at the charity. Full-time, her face now familiar in advocacy circles. The twin studied forensic science, determined to hunt down creeps in lab coats. Liam split his time between Australia and the farm, dragging his brothers into video calls with his girlfriend, who'd become their unofficial 4th sibling. And the boy? He kept a journal, filled not with secrets, but with stories. Stories of a broken mother who became a warrior. Of strangers who became brothers. Of lies that unraveled into something stronger than truth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the fields, he scribbled the final line. Family isn't the blood you're given. It's the life you choose to fight for. He closed the journal, smiling as Liam's laughter echoed from the kitchen, loud, alive, and finally free. The end.